Welcome back to Voices and Views. This is Mark Matheson, and my guest is Lita Peppion. She is a board member for the Indian Peoples Action. Welcome, Lita. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank
Good.
you for the invite.
Tell us a little bit about the Indian Peoples Action. What is the purpose of this organization?
Well, Indian People's Action is a group of grassroots people from throughout the state of Montana who work for social and economic justice for Native Americans living in Montana.
All right. And what area do you focus on?
My focus as of late has been on prison reform and more specifically working to get rid of the prisons for profit.
The prisons for profit.
Yes.
Right. I've heard about them. I believe we have one here in Montana, the CCC up by Shelby.
Yeah, my son is actually in there, so unfortunately I hear a lot about it from the inside, and it's not good.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's talk about the prison in general across Montana. I have a chart here of the population percentage-wise, and over the last few years, it's been pretty stable. Whites about 77%, American Indians about 20%, African Americans 3%, and just a very minor fractional amount of other minorities. Tell us about these numbers and what they mean to you.
Okay, well, the numbers you just talked about are from the men's prison. 20% of the men in Montana prisons are Native American. Unfortunately, 36% of the women in prison in Montana are Native American, which really doesn't mean anything unless you consider that we make up 7% of the state's overall population. And then you begin to see a big difference in the numbers. There's a disparate number of Native Americans in Montana prisons. And as a result, Native American families are hurting. They're being set deeper into poverty. Children are growing up without parents. And it's hurting families, it's hurting communities.
All right. Is there any kind of a system in place to help the families of prisoners?
None that I know of. My son has been in there for 2 years for a crime he claims he did not commit, and I believe him. But there's been nothing in place to help us as far as I can see, other than we get emails if they're moved to a different facility. But other than that, we pay the extraordinarily high telephone rates to be able to speak to our family members. The prison in Shelby does not meet the nutritional requirements, and so we often have to, if we're able, send them money so that they can eat a decent meal and maybe get some protein and some fresh fruit or vegetables instead of just carbs all the time. We end up supporting the children that they're not able to because they're locked up. We're the ones who listen to their children cry for them and miss them and try to do everything for their kids while they're locked away. And admittedly, a lot of people do belong in prison, but there are also a lot of people who don't belong in there and could be crimes they commit or whatever the punishment could be a little different than putting them in a cage.
Yeah, there is a lot of talk of prison reform, and I remember not too long ago Attorney General Eric Holder made some proposals to change the system, especially regarding nonviolent offenders and those with minor drug abuse charges.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's go back to the telephone. You said that there's very high prices that it costs. Are you able to call your son whenever you want?
No, we have to wait for him to call.
You have to wait for him.
And then sometimes if we don't hear from him for a couple of weeks, and I get a little concerned when I don't hear from him for a couple of weeks, and so I'll call, and it usually takes several phone calls to find out they're in some way being punished and not able to get to the phone. The most upsetting time that my son didn't call for a couple of weeks, and I called and they wouldn't tell me what was going on with him, just said that he was being, what were they doing? They were just watching him. And about a week later, when he did finally call me, he told me that he had been in the rubber room with sort of like a straitjacket on, forced to undress naked even in front of female guards, and sleep on the floor in a rubber room with your head right next to the hole that you pee in because there's no toilet, and be under constant 24-hour-a-day observation. And that was simply because I guess a staff member asked him a question and he gave a response that they didn't like.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that is not good.
To me, that's torture. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's not discipline. That's torture.
Yeah, and I've actually read a number of reports where this is a national problem of inmates being put in the hole
Mm-hmm.
for minor infractions. Nothing violent, just refusal to accept an order, no matter how mundane.
Yeah. Well, in my son's case, an unqualified medical professional asked him if he was suicidal, and he said no. Why? Are you a psychologist? And that's why he got sent to the rubber room.
Yeah.
That's, I out here, we would ask somebody if they tried to act in a professional manner, we would ask them what their qualifications are.
Yeah.
So I don't see what the problem is with asking somebody in there as well.
All right.
What are your qualifications if you're trying to make some kind of diagnosis of my mental health?
Right. Now, back to the phone calls, they have to call you. So how does this work?
So I have to I or whoever wants to talk to him, put money on, I call an 800 number, and I put money on. You can put 25, 50, 75, or 100. Regardless of the amount you put on, there is an $8 service charge every time you put money on. And then it's about $10 for every 15-minute call.
So,
And then if they get moved, like to another facility, then it's a different company. So then you have to put more money on to a different phone company, and then you have to pay to get your money back from the other company. So, they're getting you coming and going.
yeah, so they're really making it hard on the inmate's family. They're punishing them as well, right?
That's the way I felt for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And I didn't do anything at all. I was home in bed, but I feel like I've been punished.
Yeah.
This whole thing has been a nightmare.
Yeah, and that's the feeling that I'm getting from a lot of the articles I've read. There's a Facebook page I go to, Beyond Bars, that talks about a lot of the abuses that the for-profit prisons are committing, where they are punishing the families.
They are.
And
They are. We're paying. We're paying financially. We're paying emotionally. And like you mentioned earlier, a lot of those people could be better served with treatment. There are also a lot of people with mental illnesses in there who probably need medication and behavioral therapy rather than being put into a cage and being malnutrition through.
Yeah. Another angle I was thinking about was how, if a family is struggling anyway, and there's young children involved, and they simply cannot afford to talk to the dad or the mom, on a regular basis, this creates more problems too.
It does. When I think about the people I know back home on the reservation who are every day struggling just for basic survival, maybe don't even have a phone, they don't even get to talk to them. They don't even get to talk to their family members. And then, of course, you've got to travel a long way if you want to visit them.
Yeah.
And that's another story when you go visit them. I guess they weren't quite as rude at the prison for profit as they are at the prison in Deer Lodge, as far as the way they treat family members when they come in. But either way, it's oppressive to be treated that way when we aren't the criminals. We didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, I've heard many stories where you have to have every person registered ahead of time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they deny them, and it takes months to get approved. They denied my son's son visiting rights for a year and a half.
Hmm.
With no explanation, no nothing. They don't tell you why. They just tell you, no, you can't visit. They
Yeah.
don't say why. And so then you have to call and talk to 10 different people before you can even find out why and what you can do about it.
Yeah, so beyond whatever the prisoner is guilty of, they're punishing the family in one way after another.
Yes,
and
they are.
and in doing so, perhaps creating another generation of people that do not trust authority.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
So, what other things about, you were talking a little bit about the dietary problems. I understand that among the Indian peoples in general, there is a higher incidence of diabetes because of our modern diet. Is that being dealt with at all?
Not as far as I know. They're feeding them foods that further their illness. They make it worse. Everything that they feed them at the prison for profit in Shelby, it's probably about 90% carbs, and not good carbs, but the bad carbs. The things that raise your blood sugar sky high and then drop it right down. Not good for the body to do that.
And that
definitely not good for people with diabetes.
No, and that affects the thinking process as well.
It does, and it affects the emotional process. And so if somebody doesn't feel good because they're not eating adequately and maybe get grouchy, because I don't know about you, but when I'm hungry or when I'm not well nourished, I get grouchy. And so if they get grouchy, then they get put in the hole. It's just like a vicious cycle. And the cause of a lot of their emotional reactions are right there in that prison, with guards picking at them, trying to get them to react, and that's a regular occurrence. And the poor diet and just the way they treat them in general. I mean, if they need medical care, they have to keep sending kites, and hopefully they'll get something more than a Tylenol.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, at the prison for profit, I don't even think they have any medical professionals that are licensed in the state of Montana. I do believe that they call people that are out of the state and do telemedicine, I guess, is what it is. I don't know. They may have a nurse, but in my son's case, when he got sent to the rebel room, they called a psychologist in another state. And how can you diagnose somebody you can't even see?
Right. What about educational opportunities? Is there any way that the prisoners can better themselves, getting a GED, getting some kind of a training, to help them outside world?
I'm told there is. I don't think the quality of those courses are that great, but I'm told there are. And then there are some even better ones, not so much at the prison for profit, and I don't know if that's a budget issue or what, but at MSP they offer things like welding and diesel mechanics and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been trying to get my son into those programs for 2 years, and he's been sitting there doing nothing for 2 years.
All right.
Nothing. Nothing useful at all.
But he is also able to communicate by email?
No.
He's not?
No. I've heard that some inmates can, but my son can't. And I don't know what the requirements are for that.
Interesting. Another issue, about a month or so ago, there was an interview in the Missoula station talking about the ratio of Indian Native Americans to the white population, but how there's such a discrepancy between Native American personnel at the prisons.
Oh, definitely. As far as I know, they have one. They
One.
may, according to their numbers, it looks like they might have 2 or 3.
At Shelby?
But I only
or
know of one.
At Shelby?
No, not in Shelby. They have their Native American liaison is the only one that I'm aware of. There may be a couple of guards, but I'm not positive because I think they did, on their biennial report, said they had about 3% Native American staff. And so that would definitely have to be more than the one Native American liaison who, if you've ever taken a look at his job description, has the job of about 15 people.
Yeah, I'm sure he is overworked. What about spiritual matters? We often hear about the prison chaplains and the services and everything, but if a Native American inmate does not belong to a mainline church and adheres to a Native American religion, is there any way for him to have that freedom of worship?
Well, they are allowed to do the sweat lodge. The downfall with that is that there's not a paid staff member. The DOC asks a lot of times that people who do those types of services, Native American religion type services, volunteer their time to come into the prison and do that. And we would love to, but a lot of us are, working 2 or 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads as well. So, and driving across the state on our dime and offering a free service is something we'd love to do, but we're just not able to.
Mm.
And so as a result, because there's no staff member, it's run by inmates, and it depends on, what they're doing and what they're going through. It's not as good as it could be because of that.
I see.
And the other issue that I've had with that is we also, burn sage, carry medicine bags, or have them, like my son has one on his wall. But when they do their biannual searches, the guards are very disrespectful toward those religious items. They rip them off the wall, throw them on the floor, tell people they can't have them when in fact they can, and just kind of, make a big deal out of it.
Well, that's not kind, to say the least.
No, it's not.
So now Montana only has the one for-profit prison, right?
As far as I know, I have not had the time to research some of the other facilities. I've been told that there's one also in Great Falls, or that they were transitioning it into a private facility, but I'm not positive that that's the case. And then, of course, the pre-release centers as well are not state-operated.
Oh, okay. I know there was, they built a prison down by Hardin, but last I've heard, it's empty. Is that still true?
That's as far as I know.
Yeah, but it would just be another example of the Corrections Corporation of America, like up in Shelby. So it's terrible when you build a prison for profit. I mean.
Well, yeah, there's an inherent need to keep those beds full,
yeah.
to keep the money rolling in and keep your investors happy.
Yeah.
And some of the owners of the prison for profit, are big companies: Vanguard, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Home Street, Morgan Stanley, Chase. These are big, very, very wealthy companies making money off of hurting our families.
Yeah. Well, there is definitely a lot of abuse, and in their case, crime does pay.
Yeah, it does, and it pays them very well. I mean, they're making money hand over foot, but, they're making it off of the demise of families and communities.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's just not acceptable. Most colleges teach in business school that profit is the bottom line, but I don't believe that. I don't believe profit should be the bottom line. I believe it should be your contribution to society and helping people better themselves, not a bunch of dollars.
Yeah,
to me, that's not as important as what you leave behind as far as people.
Yeah, profit does have to have a conscience.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to have one in this case.
Yeah.
Their guards are at the prison for profit. No special requirements. I mean, Joe Blow off the street can apply. No psych eval, no nothing. And so a person who's never had a job before, never had any kind of power whatsoever over their lives, all of a sudden gets a job where they have power over 500 or 1,000 men. Now, if they have any kind of problem with a certain type of crime or maybe a woman who has a problem with men or anything like that. That's not identified. And so they can bully those people and get away with it, and they do. I mean, my son has been written up a number of times for things that he doesn't do because I'm very vocal in what I do out here. As a result, he often pays in there, and has even had guards admit that they lied on their report, tried to bring it to the attention of higher-ups who would not further look at it because they did not want to, I can't remember the term, but didn't want to not support their staff.
Right.
So, they don't have any requirements. Anybody can come off the street and apply there, and to me, that's not acceptable. They're unarmed. Not too long ago, one of the guards at the prison for profit in Shelby was very severely beaten, and if they can't protect their own, how are they going to protect ours?
Right. Now, how much press release are you getting? I mean, you attracted our attention here in Great Falls. Are you getting attention elsewhere in the state?
Not a whole lot. Got on Montana Public Radio and Indian Country Today, and that's about it. Okay. We've sent them to every media agency in the state of Montana. Well, and so basically about 3 have replied.
Yeah, well, I do know that Indian Country Today is well read and all across the country. So that is a big step getting their attention.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and we're still working at getting the other attention. And I think a lot of people just aren't ready to accept the fact that this is not right. Yeah. I keep hearing all the time, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. That's a crock because sometimes people don't do the crime and they're still doing the time.
Yeah.
Or I get letters from inmates all the time. I got one, and of course I don't have time to check their records or if they're telling me the truth, but I got one who told me he got 30 years for poaching. His sons were ages 4 and 5. So they're never going to see their dad.
Yeah. There actually is a lot of articles on the internet, Raw Story, Alternate, Truth Out. A lot of these different alternative news organizations are bringing these abuses to light, and it's something that people have to realize. Just like you said, if you're not prepared to do the crime, or the time, don't do the crime. That's a horrible cliche when you're a minority, especially, or are poor.
Yeah. Well, like in my son's case, I mean, he was basically railroaded. They knew who actually did it, and no further investigation. That person has never been arrested. In fact, he was going to be their star witness if we went to trial. But the other thing they do is threaten people so that they will accept a plea, which to the courts means they accept guilt. But even if they don't accept guilt. So like in my son's case, they were telling him, you either take this plea or you do 30 years in prison, and you're going to be found guilty. Well, you have 5 people in positions of authority in a suit telling you you're going to do 30 years in prison. You're sitting there saying you're not guilty, but that doesn't matter. You're going to take the plea. I mean, you're going to take 10 years instead of 30.
Right.
And they do that all the time.
Now,
because we can't afford attorneys. The public defender we had, I was in his office one day and I heard his secretary tell somebody who called in that they needed a $10,000 retainer for him to defend them. How many of us have $10,000 to drop down? Very few of us.
Yeah.
And so we're stuck with an overworked, underpaid public defender. And if you've seen their wages, they are underpaid. And I've worked in public defender offices, and they are definitely overworked.
Mm-hmm.
And all they have time to do is plead them out. That's all they can do. And when I filed a complaint against my son's public defender with the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, they denied it and said that his job was not to provide my son a defense. His job was to guide him through the system. to me, that doesn't make sense.
You know,
You don't need guidance; you need a defense.
right. And for our listeners, it's important. We're not trying to be soft on crime.
No, definitely not. Definitely not being soft on crime.
But I read it wasn't from the Corrections Corporation of America, but it was another big time player in the prison for profit deal. It was their investor letter, and I tell you what, that was one of the most chilling things I've ever read. They were talking about how great an investment this was, and the steps they were taking to ensure a profit. I wished I had it before me now, but it was a chilling.
I wish I could see it. It is. Well, CCA, and I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before, spent $17.5 million lobbying in D.C. to assure their beds are full, and
Right.
they make a profit.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, they can also, when they write up the contract with the state or federal agency, that they can require a guaranteed minimum occupancy.
They do. And they also require a tremendous buyout if the state wants to back out.
Yeah. So it's a strange direction the prisons have gone. We need some
it's
changes.
one of the biggest lies in America.
Yeah, we need some changes there. We don't want to get soft on crime, but we want to make sure that the families are not punished, that the prisoners are treated fairly while they are doing their time.
Definitely, that they're not tortured. But we also want to make sure that people get a fair shake in the courts and in the justice system, and low-income people are not getting that, and that's why we fill up prisons.
Yeah.
We're not getting justice. We're getting railroaded.
Yeah.
Whether and the other thing that they do is mix criminals. Well, we got rapists, we got murderers, we got psychos in with somebody who got a DUI or too many driving while suspended tickets, and to me that's insane.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be in there with those people who are raping and killing. I don't want to be their neighbor.
No. It's a very complicated problem, and it'd be a very complicated answer to the problem.
Oh, I don't think that it's that complicated. I think that if we start treating diseases or mental health conditions, I think if we offer more treatment programs instead of cages, and I think that if we fund public defenders at a higher rate where they actually have time to provide a defense instead of just plead someone through the system, those are simple things, and they could be done now.
Yeah. Well, there has to be a desire, and it's going to take
leadership.
Yeah, and it's going to take voices like yours to help do that.
Yeah.
Now, do you have a website that people can go to?
Indian People's Action has a Facebook page. Still working on a website.
Okay.
It's a very, very grassroots. We have minimal funding, and we have one employee, one paid employee, and then a lot of volunteers. So haven't quite got the website up yet, but we do have that Facebook page where people are welcome to comment, come and find out how they can help by contacting their representatives and making calls and all different ways that people can help.
All right. Well, that's a good place to start. And also some of the websites I talked about, Beyond Bars, Alternate.
Yeah, I do visit that one quite often and always share their links on Facebook.
The Southern Poverty Law Center, and there's a lot of places that are really working, but unless the people on the street get streetwise.
Yeah, if they understand that who's filling those prisons, they're not bad people. My son's just a kid.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to the old idea of penitentiary. What is supposed to help them, make them a better citizen once they're released, but it's not really doing.
Not happening.
It's not happening.
I'm appalled that they call it the Department of Corrections, because I see very little correcting going on. I mean, they keep trying to force my son to go to boot camp. Well, he was going to go to the Marines before they put him in there. So he does, and part of the boot camp is you have to admit guilt, and he won't admit guilt. So he's failed it twice, and they're trying to make him go again. Why?
Yeah. Well, I do encourage all of our listeners to get involved with this because it is a growing problem, and it's a solution that is not solving anything. It's creating the bigger problem.
It is. It's putting people, like I said, deeper into poverty. It's breaking up families. It's causing children to grow up without parents. It's just nothing good about it. Nothing.
Yeah.
Except for the investors.
Except for the investors. Crime does pay.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciated this visit, Lita. And
I did too. Thank you very much.
Again, your Facebook page is the Indian People's Action.
Yes.
And people, our listeners, please check that out and educate yourselves. Let's be part of the solution, not the problem. And
let's all educate ourselves.
And if you want to make some money, invest in the company, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's.
I think there are better ways to make money, and I don't think money is the be-all, end-all of the world. I think we need to take care of our future generations.
Yes, we do. So that's my stand on it. Let's make a better future, not a worse one.
Yeah.
All right. We've been talking to Lita J. Peppion, board member of the Indian People's Action. So we thank you very much. This is Mark Matheson for Voices and Views.
Thank you very much, Mark.
You're welcome.
Thanks to everybody who listens.